Hey, this is Josh, Connections Director here at One Life Henderson. How do you live your faith when everything seems hopeless, when everything is going wrong? Let's hear from our pastor, Ryan Nunn, and see how we can answer that question.
Have you ever just been fed up with how things are? Like just to a place to where, how do I get to the next phase to where everything around me is not a mess, it's not a wreck? And I remember my wife and I several years ago decided that we were going to do a remodel on our house, right? So naturally we had to look around, and we spent years looking around, I guess I should say, looking around all the things that were driving us crazy, like stains in the floor, that we'd have cleaned and shampooed and they'd come right back, and we'd have holes in the wall and nicks here and there, imperfections that really just made us more crazy than anything. They weren't really bad, and yes, I'm aware it's a first world problem, but at the end of the day, we knew there were issues around us, and we needed to fix them. So then we go on this hunt and we say, okay, what do we want this to look like? What do we want it to be? How do we take these imperfections that we're experiencing and seeing on a daily basis every single day of our life, and how do we go find a preferred picture of what we want the future to look like? And for me, it was Instagram. Like I went on Instagram, and you do all these hashtags you can follow, like farmhouse design and modern farmhouse, because ultimately we wanted to pick where was our shiplap going to go, right? That's kind of what we wanted to do and what we were thinking. And so we found the perfect picture. We found the idea around what we wanted to, and that was all great. We were really, really excited. And then we started the project, and everything from having to rebuild an entire exterior wall to having multiple layers of drywall on the ceilings that were really problematic to deal with, to electrical issues, to plumbing issues. We had a terrible run of problems that we had to figure out how to solve along the journey. And what happens is we're discontent with how things are, and we see the picture and it gets me excited, but I just wondered sometimes in the middle of that journey, was it enough to make me, was it worth it? Was that picture of how things are and how I want them to be, how they're going to be, is it worth the struggle and the stress that I'm walking through right now? And really that reminds me a lot of what we're all experiencing today. You go outside and you try to, maybe you have a thought or a question about COVID or vaccines, or maybe you have concerns about, certain political things or whatever it may be. You walk around, if you ask those questions, it's almost like you're in trouble if you do, and you're in trouble if you don't. It's like you're an evil human being no matter what you say or no matter what you think. It's almost like we're not allowed to use our brains and think critically anymore and ask questions. And then you've got the whole COVID pandemic in and of itself. It's like there's suffering all around us. People are in trouble and they're in pain. And people that we know, I lost my mother in December. And so we're talking about people that are experiencing real life tragedy and real life struggle that I'm connected to almost every day of my life. And what I get to do as a pastor is connect with people. Right? I believe that really God's put me here for the purposes of being able to hear their story and help them navigate kind of the spiritual things in this life. Help them navigate reading their Bibles, help them navigate pain, funerals, weddings, all of those things. And pretty consistently, what I'm hearing over and over and over are we're in the middle of chaos. I'm in the middle of struggle. I'm in the middle of pain, and I don't know what to do with it. And so what I wanted to do briefly today was look at a story in the Bible, or even a passage, really. It's not even a full story. It's just a word that we have from God that an ancient people were given a couple thousand years ago, this word from God. And I want us to look at that and see what it is that we can take from it. But overall, there's three big ideas, and I want to give you the first two now. Kind of the first big idea is we need to be conscious, right? In the context of being conscious of where we are. And I want you to listen for themes of that. And the second kind of big idea that I want us to look at is that we want to be confident. Like we want to be confident in the future picture, right? Being conscious of where we are, that's kind of like all the stains in the carpet and holes in the wall that we saw. And then the picture of the ideal house, it kind of represents confidence. That's what we're looking for. So we're looking to be conscious and we're looking to be confident. And those are the first two big ideas that I want to see, or I want you to think of as we talk through this passage in the book of the Bible called Jeremiah. Now to get there, if you wanted to press pause, you can open up to the center of your Bible. You should find Psalms and keep swiping to the right a couple books, and you'll see, 2 or 3 books later, you'll find Jeremiah there. And we're going to go to chapter 30, and we're going to begin, and we're going to look at the passage from chapter 12 to chapter 17. Now, there's a lot going on right here that I'm not going to have time in this specific video to chat through and to catch you up on. So to help you out, in the description below, we're going to put a couple links. We're going to link the passage that you can go read, Jeremiah 30, 12 to 17. You could even do extra work. Look at Jeremiah 29. It's similar content there. So you could read 29 and 30. You could read the entire book, whatever you wanted to do. But we're going to put the link to that passage right there. And then we're also going to put a link to a Bible Project video. These are guys that do a great job of explaining what's happening in books and why they're written and who wrote them, and some of these details that I'm not going to have time, nor am I really probably qualified to talk through in this specific moment. So some of the background to this Jeremiah passage that we're going to be looking at a little bit today is imagine that there's this war-torn country, right? This war-torn country comes in, they take dignitaries, they take artisans, they take all these important people away, and they leave kind of everybody else in Israel. Everybody that's not of value to the kingdom of this place called Babylon. So I want you to imagine there's a place that just went through battle, right? That they've got mental and emotional pictures, things that they've probably seen or heard about that have happened that are terrifying. And they probably had allies lined up to come help, or people to come help them defend off this country that either didn't show or showed, and they got defeated as well. So I want you to imagine a person that all around had these big expectations of what was going to happen, and the exact opposite happened. And the only difference between that, like my home remodeling story, for example, is that involves life and death situations, like legitimate life and death things, that they've watched life and death. They're watching another kingdom come in and bring all that in. I need you to feel that for a minute. Like, I need you to feel like modern day equivalent would be kind of a World War II, or maybe even a modern day Afghanistan feel, to where there's bombs going off and there's gunshots, that kind of stuff. You just imagine what that would have sounded like back then to this ancient people. And that's what these people were going through. And that's fascinating to me because of the passage that we're going to be reading. It kind of kicks off talking about all of the bad things. Like, you got wounds that aren't going to be healed. You don't have any friends. You're allies. You're essentially alone. Oh, and by the way, I'm God, and I'm supposed to be your God and take care of you. And I'm the one that did all these things to you. And now, by the way, it's your fault. Right? That's kind of a weird thing to write. But I think the structure of what he says is important. And as we look back into what I said earlier, my two big things would be that we want to make sure that we're conscious of where we are, but we're also confident in the promises of God. This passage pulls out those two ideas pretty well, because he paints a picture, a solid picture of where these people are in verses 12 through 15. And then in verses 16 and 17, it comes back and says, but anybody who devours you, I will devour. Those who come and take your stuff, guess what? I'm going to go take their stuff. Those who come and do wrong to you, I'm going to go do wrong to them. I'm going to pay them back for what they've done to you. And verse 17 is the best, because he talks about, I will restore and heal you. And that's the promise. So verses 12 through 15 are the conscious or awareness, however you want to say it. The word I use is conscious. Like Jeremiah, or God through Jeremiah, is letting his people know, here's where you are, period. This is the reality around you at the moment. But here's the promise of the future coming. Here's the ideal picture of where things are going to end up. Now, I don't know about you, but that leaves me wondering. Because what I know to be true is whenever I was remodeling my home, I knew exactly what I wanted done. That wasn't the problem. The problem wasn't even that we were having to see these things every day. That wasn't the biggest challenge. I would have frustration, stains in the carpet, we'd gripe and we'd move on. The real challenge didn't even start until the day that we began the journey towards restoration. The day that we began the journey towards the ideal picture that I had in my head. In this case, for God's people, they would have had to continue to living out this exile under the rule of the Babylonians for however long it took to get from where they were to God's promises coming to fruition. And what does it take to get through those things is the question. Like they're in probably the single most challenging area or era or single most challenging time of their life, however you want to say that. And they've got this promise from God, here's how things are going to be. But then we're left with the question, yeah, but what about the things that are? Like how many more people are going to do us wrong, are going to hurt us? How many people are going to steal from us, are going to do other harmful things? How long are we going to have to feel alone before this promise from God comes to fruition? And how do we navigate that? And I can imagine what that would be like for those people. I wasn't there, but here's one thing that I know. Is that as hard as that promise may be to accept, even for you, I believe it. Let me back up and say this. I believe that God, through this verse, is promising to bring restoration to me and to you. I believe that's a promise of God. I believe that with everything in me. I believe it can translate from them to us. I just do. I believe that God restores all things. And it's a cool, actually in Romans it says it this way. He says that, all things work together for the good for those who know Him and are called according to His purpose. That may not be an exact quote, but that's a pretty close quote to the Romans 8, chapter 8. You can find that on your own. So it's a similar concept. So I believe that there's a promise here that we can step into, that we can believe is coming. The challenge is, what does the journey to the promise coming to fruition look like? And that's where being conscious of where we are, being confident in God's promises, the promise that He's given us to bring to restoration, can produce courage for the journey. Because what we need is we do need to be conscious. We do need to be confident in God's promises, but we also need courage. We need to be courageous in the midst of the journey. Because the journey in and of itself is quite possibly the hardest part. If you've experienced anything, the journey to getting my home from where it was pre-ideal photo, like from pre-remod, to where it was post-remod, the hardest part of that wasn't the front or the back. The hardest part was the journey. And how are we, as followers of Jesus, or maybe you don't identify as a follower of Jesus, how are we supposed to navigate this difficult, you can call it suffering, you can call it pain, you can call it whatever you want to call it. How do we navigate the journey? How do we find courage in the midst of the journey? And I wish I had a really kind of pragmatic answer for you. I don't. My brain doesn't necessarily work that way. But here's what I know, is there's this really cool verse in the New Testament, in the book of John. It's a gospel, it's a biography about Jesus' life. And it's John chapter 1, and it's verses 4 and 5. And it talks about in Jesus that there's this life, right? And this life becomes light to men. And then it says that the light shines in the darkness and that the darkness can't comprehend it. So it says, in Jesus there's life. The life in Jesus is the light of men. And in the darkness, or when the light shines in the darkness can't comprehend what's happening. And I think that's a pretty decent prescription for us as followers of Jesus, as we're called to kind of navigate these things. Like we're called to say, or what our claim is as followers of Jesus, is that we claim that we worship this suffering Savior Jesus, that in Him all hope and mercy and peace can all be found. All the things that we want out of this life can all be found in Him. And sometimes we like to go there and say, I've accepted that, and it stops, even though the journey keeps on going. Like we like to come to these moments to where, yes, I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus. And then it's like that moment was kind of the crescendo of all things. And what happens in the next journey after I do that, and then things get really bad. And that's where John chapter 1 comes in. It says, in Him we can experience life. So as a follower of Jesus, I can experience life. And that life becomes light to us, to all men. It becomes light to men. And then when things get the darkest, when things are dark, the light shines and the darkness can't comprehend what's happening. So as a follower of Jesus, Like in the midst of your suffering, like in the midst of your anxiety and depression or something, or maybe in the midst of your job loss, or maybe in the midst of you losing a loved one to COVID, or maybe in the midst of some of the deepest, most significant challenges that represent darkness in your life, in the midst of that, the light of Jesus that comes from the life of Jesus can shine, and the things that are causing all the darkness and creating all the darkness don't know what to do with it. And I think I know, like I know people that just bring that light with them. I know them. You can tell there's a different aura about them. There's a different confidence that they have in the midst of struggles that I may or may not have sometimes. It's there. The light in you, if you're a follower of Jesus, is meant, it's there to shine into the dark, and the darkness can't comprehend what it is. You know, and if you're not a follower of Jesus, I know some of that may be kind of odd and out there for you, but I would say that I would like to invite you to step into that journey. I think in some capacity, have a conversation, drop something in the comments, shoot us an email, whatever, what have you. But I would like to invite you on a journey to where you can experience, ongoing experience of being able to find hope in the midst of the darkness, to be able to experience light in the midst of the darkness, to be able to experience joy in the midst of the darkness. Now, I'm not saying that the second that you become a follower of Jesus that all that goes away. I believe there's a process. I believe that as a follower of Jesus, we're probably going to experience some darkness, maybe not more than what other people have experienced, but definitely our fair share of the darkness. The question is not if we experience the darkness. The question is, how does the light from Jesus within us respond to the darkness? So if you're not a follower of Jesus, I would at least like to invite you to consider what that may look like, because what I know or what I feel to be the truth is that it's really the only place in this world that we can go to find purpose in the midst of our suffering. It's the only way we can find hope in the midst of our struggles and our challenges. It's the only real place to where we can find something that absolutely confuses all the darkness around us that we're experiencing. And then what we can do is we can go out and invite other people to that. And we can say, hey, come see this light that I've experienced that just confuses the darkness to no end. So I would say to you this, I would say take your step. I would say figure out what it is, what are the things in your life, know where you are, be conscious of the things around you and how things are doing. And then find the promises of God. Be confident in those promises. And then let that confidence in Him produce the courage in you to thrive in the midst of the journey, no matter how dark things may become.
So Ryan talked a lot about being conscious of your reality. You know, things are tough sometimes. Be conscious of where you are right now. And ultimately to be confident in God's promises, what God tells you is coming. But the biggest action step here is to be courageous on the journey. So what is your courageous next step? Maybe for you, that's to crack open the Bible. Did you know that 4 times a week is kind of that breaking point where engaging with Scripture has a profound impact on your life? 4 days per week. Maybe that's your courageous next step. Maybe try to achieve that 4 days per week. Maybe it's just having a conversation with someone about your doubts. Reach out to someone, have that conversation. If you can't find anyone, reach out to us. Drop us a comment below, email us at henderson@onelifechurch.org, or reach out to us in some way. We would love to have that conversation with you. But my encouragement to you would be to think about that. What is your courageous next step? Hey, thanks for joining us again this week. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can continue this wonderful journey of trusting and following Jesus together. And while you're at it, check out some of our other videos right here.